Good morning and good afternoon, dear friends, colleagues, and our special guests. A very warm welcome to the launching session of the book, Managing the Local Climate. My name is Long Hua, and I am Program Manager for MetaMeta. On behalf of the organizers and the authors, I would like to welcome and to thank you very much for joining us today. Today, we look forward to get to know about the book, which is a nice collection of knowledge and experience from many different experts and organizations. Also, we would like to take the occasion to share and to discuss the important topic of microclimate management, how it works, and very importantly, how to make it work at the speed and the scale that we all desire when facing climate change and environmental change in general. I first invite you to take a look at today's program. We have a very exciting program with 3 main sessions. First, 2 of the authors will present the highlights from the book. After that, we will have an interactive session where we invite all participants to share their experience. Then we have a panel discussion on local climate management. We will end with some closing remarks. You are all welcome to introduce yourself in the chat box and share your thoughts at any time via chat. This session will be recorded and I ask for your consent about this. Without any further ado, I would like to invite Femke van Woesik, one of the book authors, to give some highlights on the book. Femke is a program manager on microclimate at MetaMeta. She has been working intensively on the theme across contexts in Kenya, Ethiopia, India, and beyond. So the floor is yours, dear Femke.
Yeah, thank you very much, Long. Rainier, can you show the next slide? Yeah, so the idea of local climate management as a concept and also as this book came actually from my colleague, Dr. Frank van Steenbergen, who has been stressing the importance of microclimates to protect ecosystems against climate change for almost 10 years now. And during his many years of working in the field of land and water management, he found that microclimates often go unobserved and unattended. And he saw that a lot of attention was going to macro climate predictions and trends, and far less to how it actually translated into weather at the local level. And this is why we wanted to create this book, to give more attention to this topic. So we wanted to break down all the components of the microclimate and describe how they work as a system in an easy to understand way. We wanted to collect the interesting stories and evidence from communities all over the world that in some way try to improve their local climate. And most importantly, we wanted to translate all that knowledge into a guiding kit with an overview of many practices suitable for different landscapes. So these 5 minutes, I will share a few highlights from the book. But let me start with explaining what local climates are. So next slide, right here. Yeah, so local climates, or microclimates as we also call them, are the local interplays between different factors such as soil temperature, air temperature, wind direction, soil moisture, solar radiation, and air humidity. And these local climates are determined by the outlook of the local landscape. So next slide. Yeah, this is a picture of how an alteration in the landscape actually created a unique microclimate. So this is an abandoned quarry in Sicily. And the microclimate within this quarry is actually cooler, wetter, and more protected from winds. So here you see how an alteration in the landscape actually make the microclimate within that quarry differ from the climate outside the quarry. And not only does nature create these different local climates, but we can also create conducive local climates ourselves through certain practices. So this means that we can actually create local climates that are well buffered against the predicted global temperature rise and the challenges that climate change bring. So next slide, please. So how this works, this is an example from a midsummer day on a farm in Chile. And here you see a difference of more than 5 degrees Celsius in land surface temperature due to different on-farm practices on this vineyard. And the areas where there's water being held, you see are significantly cooler than the more dry areas. And to understand how this is possible, we must look at the energy balance. So next slide, please. So this can be explained with this picture. And what we see here are two landscapes. So on the left, you see a dry, bare landscape, and on the right, you see a moist, green landscape. And both landscapes, in this case, receive the same amount of solar energy. But on the left, there's no water to evaporate and for the plants to transpire. So this means that all the incoming energy is used for heating up the soil and the air, and this results in a warmer landscape. And in the green and moist landscape on the right, you can actually see that there's enough water and vegetation to evaporate and to transpire. And this means that a lot of the incoming energy is used for these evapotranspiration processes, and less energy is just left for heating up the soil and air. So this results in a cooler landscape. So this is a quick recap of the energy balance. And the way this works is actually why we argue, next slide, sorry. Is why we argue that the preservation and better management of local climates could be a third way in responding to climate change next to adaptation and mitigation. So both mitigation and adaptation are in a sense defensive. So they either reduce the problem or they find the best way to live with it. But local climate management distinguishes itself by being more bottom-up and more proactive. So it empowers people to create their own local climates that are better buffered. Also very important to measure is that the effects of local climate management are easy to measure and to monitor. So we can do this through different sensors or remote sensing techniques, as we saw in the example from Chile, where the different land surface temperatures were measured through remote sensing. And managing the local climate can be done through a wide range of interventions. And this book documented these in a guiding kit that can be used across many landscapes. So the first important set of interventions are to retain water better with water harvesting techniques. So as we saw in the previous image, when there's more soil moisture in the landscape, through the energy balance, it will even out the temperature peaks and lows. And another important intervention is regreening. And through the same way, vegetation affects how much heat is absorbed in an area and how much is radiated. And other examples are altered farming practices, solar radiation management, and wind breaks, for example. And luckily, there are many good examples of areas where these improvements have created better local climates. So here you see an example from Ethiopia. So here the Italian researchers Giulio and Elena and their team from the University of Florence, they found that large-scale landscape restoration practices that were initiated by the government of Ethiopia resulted in a reduced local land surface temperatures of up to 1.74 degrees. And the good news is that this is only one example of many. So next slide, please. And in this book, we captured many of these examples of how interventions improve the local climate conditions from all over the world. So we have examples from Peru to Kenya to from India to France. And this book invites you to look at the world not as a passive recipient of global climate change, but more as a patchwork of local climates that can be managed one by one, and altogether creating a global mosaic of resilient and beneficial local climates. Next slide, please. So this book is also a call for more intensive change. So not to do only isolated interventions, but to have a critical sum of measures that together create systemic change. So we argue to look beyond disciplines and look at the landscape as a system in which everything is connected. And once we understand this system, we can find the right balance and tweak the parameters to actually improve the local climate. And this book tells you which buttons there are and how the parameters then interact. And I want to invite Hugo de Boer, who is also one of the other authors of the book. And Hugo is an assistant professor at the geoscience faculty of Utrecht University. And he is an expert on the effects of climate change on the hydrological cycle, and the interactions between vegetation and climate. And he has been involved in writing this book from the start. So also a big thanks for all his valuable guidance and knowledge sharing.
So thank you very much, Femke. And I must say, I'm really proud to see you present this book. And also it's very nice to see how many people are joining this this book launch. So that's really cool. Yeah, maybe I can give a background towards how I became involved in this book and how the process went towards writing the book and which concepts we took into account for the underlying research. So Femke first approached me to contribute to this project as a master's student for the education program Water Science and Management. And this education program is tied to the master program Sustainable Development at Utrecht University. And both research programs are what we call applied science programs. So they are science programs, but they have a specific focus on application of this science in the context of water management and sustainable development. So in this sense, the project that Femke took up together with Meta to research how the local climate could be managed in order to better withstand climate change really fits nicely within this this teaching framework. So I was also very enthusiastic to play a role in her supervision. So one of the core concepts that I always take into account when I teach, but also when I supervise master students, is the concept of what we call usable knowledge for sustainable development. And this concept was first coined by William Clark and his co-authors in a paper 2016 in PNAS, which is called Crafting Usable Knowledge for Sustainable Development. And basically their idea is that if you want to achieve sustainable development as a scientist, you cannot get away with just doing research, but you really have to tailor your research towards, let's say, the use case. So what will be your research and your knowledge be used for? And in order to do that, you have to be really clear about the audience that you do your research for and really try to collaborate with the people that are both involved in the research, but also the people that will be doing your research. So when Femke approached me, this was a core concept that I tried to push in her thesis. So to really take into account the local environment, so both in terms of climate, but also in terms of people who will be working there, who will be taking up the knowledge that is actually shared through the book, and tailor this towards the people that are going to use it, so that it's easy for them to access, easy for them to understand, and also easy for them to implement. And by doing so, you actually do what we call co-creation and co-production. So you use the local conditions to make your research better. And in that sense, you also educate the people that are there, but you also learn from the local situation and take this knowledge into account in the research that you're doing. In the end, this also leads to building capacity, not only locally, but also from the people that are doing the research themselves. So it's really a stimulating process where people interact in order to achieve a more sustainable society. So in my sense, I'm very happy with how the book turned out. The research of Femke, when I supervised it, was very much focused on the situation in Ethiopia. However, over time, the book developed to be much broader than that, and I'm very proud to see how far it got, and I'm very enthusiastic to hear also the views of other people on that. So for now, I will stop and I'll pass on the screen to other people. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Hugo, for your interesting thoughts and information. Also for your kind words for the author. Just by the occasion, today we have 4 of the authors of the book here, and I just want to give a quick shout to all of them, Dr. Frank van Steenbergen, Femke, Francesco, and Jean. As we can see from our talk, and also from Femke and from Hugo, microclimate management is very practical and very much on the ground kind of work. There are many good practices out there, and we would like to invite our participants to share their practices in managing microclimate with us as well. Before we start sharing, let us take a look at an example from Kenya. We will listen to the story of Mr. Wilson, a Maasai school teacher and livestock herder from the South Rift Valley in Kenya. and he will share his thought about how grass planting has changed the landscape where he lives. And after that, I invite you to share your own example. So may I have the video, please?
Before the grass was planted, or before the rain, the land, the place was very hot and very, the temperature is hot. But since that small rain has rained there, the place has become cooler, and also it changed, the scenery has changed. It has become a little bit greenish than the way it was than before.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rainier. We thank Mr. Wilson also for sharing his story. Now, coming back to our participants, may I invite you to share your examples of microclimate management. We will share now with you a link on the chat box and also on the screen where you can participate on the Mentimeter tool. You can put in the code as will be shown on the screen, and you can start putting in your input. So if you go to menti.com, the website is also shown on top of the slide that you see now, and you use a code there, 71760360. It will be also on our chat box. You can just simply go to the website, copy that link, and provide the answer to the question of, do you know any example of local climate management from your own context, from your experience? That can be something from your own kitchen garden, or from your nearby river, from your farm. Yeah, we look forward to see you, and then we will see the results quickly on the screen. I hope we will all manage. If you go to the website menti.com, use the code of 71760360. Yeah, I see a lot of examples coming in. I see hedges as windbreaks on a Dutch farm. Interesting. Thank you from the lowland. Mulching and shade nets for veggie production, central in an area in Spain. It is hot there, so shading and mulching is doing a great job there. Thank you. Community gardens, of course, in Amsterdam. Green rooftop, regreening for the city of about 1 million people north of the Netherlands. I see another example. I live in Delhi, a city of urban forest, and then with my dog, Danny, he always like to go to this forest as it's cooler there to beat the Delhi heat. Thank you very much. Mangrove reforestation in the Philippines. Now we are going to the coast of Philippines. Even at the micro level, increases protection from cyclones. Thank you. Then we see, yes, although not known under that name, regenerative farms or restored natural areas are also examples. Very much agree with that. Yeah, we have a nice story from Malta, semi-arid Mediterranean area. We use prickly pear cactus plants. Yeah, I don't see it too well. I think I would guess that's for windbreaks. Yeah. Yeah, we use individual leaves to protect the seedlings from the harsh sun. Very nice. From Pakistan, small pond construction. I suppose for water retention, for cooling down the area. Solar panels installed on top of greenhouses to prevent temperature getting too high. I see a lot of very diverse and beautiful set of examples here. Farmers managed natural regeneration in Tanzania. Soil moisture management, I see there. Yeah, in Kenya, regreening. Farmer in Drenthe claim it rains more east of the Hondsdroeg. Sorry if I cannot get it right. A forested area than the west of it. So you see the role of the forest there. Tree windbreak, we see that also now not from Malta, but then from Macedonia. Thank you. Nepal, plastic mulching. you cover the farm also with straw, afforestation in Nepal. Now, I thank you all very much for sharing the great examples. I think we are having still, I'm struggling a little bit because there's a lot to come still, and I invite you all to share. For the sake of timing, I would like to thank you all and invite us to the next session of the book launch, which is a panel discussion. Today we have an excellent panel, and please allow me to briefly introduce our distinguished panelists. We have Dr. Ronald Hultjes from Wageningen University. Ronald is an associate professor working on land-atmosphere interactions and vice versa. It's a great pleasure to have you, my dear Wageningen colleague. Next, we have Ms. Judith Swartz. Judith is an author focused on nature-inspired solutions. Her latest book is called The Reindeer Chronicles, and it is a global tour of Earth repair, featuring stops in Norway, Spain, Hawaii, New Mexico, and more. So thank you very much for joining. I look forward to hear from you. Then we have Dr. Nathaniel Matthews. Nate is CEO at the Global Center Global Resilience Partnership, which is a group of over 65 diverse organizations working on advancing resilience through on-the-ground innovation, knowledge generation and sharing, and shaping policy. It's our pleasure to have you on the panel. Thank you very much, Nate. Then we have Ms. Ishani Sonak. Ishani is specialized in ecological and agroecological systems. She is an experienced researcher in the field of environmental policy, land restoration, land rights, and she did several social and environmental impact assessments in India and in parts of Africa. Great that you can join today from India, Ishani. Last but not least, we have Mr. Omer van Rettegem. Omer is a theme expert, land, water, and ecosystems at the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you very much for joining us today with the discussion. In connection to the book and to the insight that we have seen so far, I would like to invite our discussion to center around three key aspects of how to make microclimate management work. Let us discuss three questions with our panelists. Number one is on scale and creating impact at scale. Number two, on how to further learn, enrich the knowledge and the practice body about microclimate management. And number three, on awareness and setting the agenda. Now we have on the screen our first question. It starts with one of the fundamental notions of the book on microclimate management, or what the author termed it, the patchwork approach. They write that while the impacts on microclimate management tend to be direct and very tangible on site, the main idea is to build this patchwork collective to reach the impact at scale. And they argue that the key to impact at scale is through creating a global mosaic of local climates, place by place. And this mechanism resonates very well with Judith's book, The Reindeer Chronicles, where you wrote on the replenishing of the Middle Eastern deserts. You ask, how many microclimates does it take to make a new climate? So maybe I would like to invite Judith to comment on this question, please.
Thank you. Yeah, what I will say is that this book and this conversation fills a real gap in how policymakers and the media and how climate change is, it fills a gap in how climate change is discussed, because it empowers people locally. Often when we only look at climate change from a perspective of greenhouse gases, it leaves ordinary people without agency. But this is something that people can do everywhere. Of course, solutions are tailored to different environments, but the more that people implement this and their neighbors see the impact, actually, the neighbors will receive benefit from the impact. So, for example, as an area is regreened and nature starts to thrive, then you have more wildlife and pollinators and more which will move around the area and benefit other farmers, for example, and more transpiration and more moisture in the atmosphere that can be condensed and come down as rain. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Yes, thank you very much, Judith. And yeah, since we are talking about the book also, I think a lot of people would be very interested to take a look. If you can share the link there, I think that would be fantastic. I would like to go a little bit further down this line from the patchwork approach with a climate scientist. And so I refer to Ronald, to dear Ronald. From a land atmospheric interaction perspective, what can we say about the mechanism of creating impact at a larger scale? So again, back to the patchwork approach. Do we sometimes see that the impact signal is more significant from the sum comparing to the parts together? I would love to hear your examples or your thoughts on this.
Yeah, thank you, Ron, for inviting me and talking here. First of all, congratulations to Femke and the other authors, of course, for bringing this this nice work to the public. I think it's really very useful for practitioners in land restoration business to also be aware of this perspective of changing the local and perhaps even the regional climate. I've been studying that myself for quite a while. Especially I'm very interested to see if we can close the loop, the loop that is also depicted in the book itself on page 24, enhancing evaporation by increased vegetation, leading to more clouds and perhaps even leading to more rainfall and thereby enhancing vegetation itself. So you get a kind of self-sustained loop, improving the local climate and the local ecosystems. Of course, the big discriminator here is scale. Scale, the area that has to be revegetated or otherwise has to be improved by rainfall harvesting techniques or whatever, has to be large enough so it can affect the entire boundary layer and thereby affect clouds and eventually also producing rain. Now, I think the good message here is, and that brings it very nicely to the concluding chapter about the patchwork concept, is that it does not have to be a contiguous area that has been improved. It looks like many small patches with enhanced evaporation, with enhanced improved vegetation, can be as effective in affecting the regional climate as one contiguous large area. So that really perhaps is let's say an unrealized potential there for this patchwork concept. That, yeah, as I said, the many small areas can be as effective in influencing regional climate as one contiguous large improved area. I think that's the one thing I would like to confirm from the concept that's brought forward in this this book.
Thank you very much, Ronald. And now, already in the beginning of the discussion, we see, scales start to come in all the way from the garden to the landscape scale. So that's very interesting to hear. For the sake of time being, I think let's then move on to the second point of discussion, and that is about enriching and strengthening the knowledge and the practice body of how to manage our local climate. I think this book is sort of a marvel in the sense that it collects and documents a diverse set of very different measures for managing local climate. Of course, with a focus on land and water management, with a strong focus, I must say. Many of these measures are traditional, sometimes a native wisdom, and they are practiced and passed down through generations. And I believe that there are much more to learn from the community, from different parts of the world. And the question then is how we can learn more from the local practices and indigenous knowledge. With this question, I recall that Ishani, you recently did your research on the Maasai community in Kenya. I think you have some good story to tell along this question. So if I may invite you, share your thought, please.
Oh yeah, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And yes, I'm very happy to share what I learned from my research trip to Kenya. So I think apart from just reading through papers on managing local climate, I was very lucky to go there and physically see and physically rather feel how local interventions can have an impact on climate. So historically, the Maasai are known for their approach towards managing their vegetation in a way that there are different wet and dry grazing areas. So they leave the areas for managing their pastures. But along the way, community leaders, they kind of gathered a sense of how this practice is kind of also influencing the availability of water in areas. So I was in the South Rift Valley in Kenya, and the community has, along with, of course, organizations like local organizations and Just Dig It and Meta Meta, the community has, for example, dug bunds downstream in an area. And there are also community dug water pans in the same area. So just after 3 or 4 days of rainfall, and the community observed that the scenery of as we also heard the Maasai school teacher in the video, that the scenery has kind of changed, and it's greener, and there is more water in the water pans. And they also observed that, yes, if the rainfall is heavy, we might see more siltation, because they're aware of the fact that the land is degraded and the soil is loose. So there are stones put upstream so that the siltation can be stopped. But also you speak to the leaders, and with their knowledge of climate, of how soil moisture and evapotranspiration work. A leader from the region, Kenyatta, he kind of explained me of how he's really looking forward that the vegetation, if because of, for example, digging soil bunds, it's a nature-based or nature-inspired solution. It's not something alien to the region. So if they're digging soil bunds, the water, when it rains, will be captured in these soil bunds. And he felt that when grasses come up, the energy will be lost in evapotranspiration, as Femke was mentioning in the presentation slide, that the energy. So basically, he explained me the entire energy balance, that soil moisture would be increased and evapotranspiration would take away some of the energy, and that the area will be cooler. So I think they also were ready to change their livestock routes depending on where the regeneration of land is happening. So the community comes together, and this is not only good for local climate, but it kind of builds a socio-ecological resilience in the area. So I think this patchwork approach to manage local climate is also very good for building the resilience of the region. And if it's a bottom-up approach where the community comes together and makes decisions and provides their inputs it makes a participatory decision making, I think it's a very key point to managing local climate.
Yes, thank you very much, Ishani. And again, thank you for also the interesting video that you just shared. Now, on the same note, I'd like to come to Nate, but a bit different perspective. Knowledge sharing and on-the-ground interventions are very often at the core of your organization, the Global Resilience Partnership. I would like to ask you, from this partnership perspective, how do you could you share some thoughts on this question, please?
Sure, and thanks for the opportunity to speak at this really important book launch. So we approach resilience, one of the sort of key pillars of resilience, if you will, for us revolves around the point of inclusivity and equity. And so it's really recognizing that, a resilient system is inclusive and equitable, and inclusive participation is critical for building trust and facilitating collective action, but also for responding to volatility and change. And we know, for example, that more equal societies, in terms of development, income, access to resources, et cetera, are less prone to instability. And this is really critical when we're talking about managing for climate extremes. And it's a great example here showing the book, the importance of developing and adapting these multi-level inclusive governance approaches and supporting inclusive participation by bringing in local knowledge. And the slide before you had up was a nice example of the picture in the background of the Zai system, which is a microcatchment system often used in West Africa. But I think what it comes down to for us as a partnership is really investing the time and recognizing the value of this inclusive participation and bringing in Indigenous knowledge. And often the ideas come from, the global North are not necessarily appropriate, and they're dismissive sometimes of Indigenous knowledge. So it's really embracing that need for diversity and the need for adaptive management on the ground, and recognizing that the people living in the places often and working those lands often have the best knowledge and skills to manage those resources and really manage them often in a much more sustainable way than imported knowledge would do so. So I think it's taking that time to invest in listening, in trust building, and inclusive and multi-level governance that is really so critical. And this book is a great example of the value of that. And time again, we see the value of that in our work. And also we're founding signatories of the locally led adaptation principles, which is really encompasses that need to use local practices and ensure that investments in climate are locally led.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you very much, Nate, for your. I think in a very short time, I've heard a lot of very critical remark and requirements for local climate management to thrive, let's say. And I just pick up inclusiveness. I think I can't agree more. If we want to have this knowledge body to thrive and to be picked up, to be shared across landscapes and context, that's very important to include everybody, keep everybody on board. I don't know, we have just 1 minute for this session before we move to the next question. So if I wonder if any of the panelists has a quick remark or a comment or response before we move on. Please feel free to speak if you want. No? Then I suggest yes, please. Yeah.
May I comment? Just a very brief note, because I think these are very important remarks that are made by Nat. And what I see is there's a growing interest in learning. We have changed our monitoring evaluation terminology into monitoring, evaluation, and learning terminology. But what are we learning? We are learning from what we develop as practices, as interventions, and see whether they work. We're not learning from the interventions that are presented here that are local interventions. So I think there needs to be a kind of shift in our thinking, what learning really means, and do we want to learn also from local perspectives? And I see it happening in my ministry, for instance, and our MEL systems based on theory of change, but not on local practices. And I think this is a plea, the book is a plea for changing this attitude.
If I could also just very briefly jump in, I completely agree. And I think it's also a plea to recognize that when we think about our monitoring systems, that we're monitoring for change, not only for needs that meet those of donors, but also meet the needs of local people, so and local knowledge. So we have to ensure that the systems work both ways and benefit both.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Omer, for Nate, for following up. Now, I would like now to move to the third question on setting the agenda and for initiating actions. Our observation is that local climate management practices, as useful and beneficial as they are currently underutilized and sometimes overlooked. From the policy and international development perspective, I would like again to hear from Omer to address this question. How can we bring local climate management more prominently on the policy agenda?
I tried to come in. Sorry. Yes, thank you very much for the question. I think when looking at from the perspective of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I really see three promising developments related to this climate change. The first one, and that's I think covered by the book quite a lot, is the landscape approach. It's all about landscape, and I see that's been on the agenda for like maybe 15 years, but I see a growing interest. And a growing interest related to, for instance, food security, that is from the food security and nutrition perspective, working with communities, there's a kind of awareness being raised now that you don't need to look only at the farm level, but also at the community and the landscape level, because there is a close link. And that is the microclimate that is described in this book. I think this is promising because the agriculture of the eco-agriculture and partners started from ICRAF a long time ago in the 90s, but now there's an initiative like the 1000 Landscape. I think there is a natural connection between these two, and there's not enough, I think, integration of this local perspective presented in the book and these landscape interventions. I think here is really a great opportunity, and it's promising, I think, because there is a growing interest in this. The second aspect that I think is very promising, and it was already mentioned by Nate, is the locally led adaptation. There's been a development of locally led adaptation principles 2 years ago. And yeah, we now strongly support these locally led adaptation principles. And you also saw in Sharm el-Sheikh that there was a lot of interest in these locally led adaptation principles and how to bring them forward. And I think what is important is that the focus of the principles is to try to get local decision making much more to the forefront and being the most important, having the local voice, having also being patient funding to local level, build robust understanding. And I understand with robust understanding, a combination of local and scientific understanding, and ensure transparency and accountability. And as Nate just said, monitoring and evaluation, not only for the donor, but monitoring and evaluation and accountability at a local level, and develop that kind of systems. And I think this is really where the close link is, because the locally led adaptation is about the participation, and this is about the physical realization. And I think these two need to go together. And I think this is really an opportunity for the coming years to work on. And the third thing, I think, where it's connected to the climate agenda and where we can put it on the agenda, is the awareness and the climate justice. It is a growing area of interest, climate justice, and it's related to human rights. And I think that is a very important aspect related to the local climate, because we tend to forget it, and local climate and environmental defenders are really under stress. And that's really an area that's maybe forgotten, because once people start defending their area and wanting to improve the local climate, there's a lot of opposition. And I think these three developments, landscape, locally led adaptation, and climate justice, are really the links to the local climate improvement, and can be used by this book. And my plea would be to get more of interaction between these streams to strengthen this.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Thank you very much, Omer, for putting this together nicely in 3 angles. I see that there is interest, and there is also a strong motivation to move from the policy domain, for example, towards locally led adaptation, ensuring justice and learning in a different way. Let us move now to the community and see, what could be a possible way to push it forward. I would like to talk with Judith. You can share, you've come across cases in different communities. So how can we press? What are the important buttons to press when it comes to working with local communities to raise awareness on this topic?
Well, I can say as a communicator, it has been challenging to have the larger community of people engaged in climate work to acknowledge the importance of the land. But now I am seeing that this is changing. So one thing is, so success breeds success. When people see that a landscape is thriving, other people maybe in the locality may be curious. I think of one example of a rancher in Mexico, in northern Mexico, in Chihuahua, who his land was flourishing and so beautiful, so full of life. The grasses were high, and the neighbor said, "You get more rain there." You know, or that's the reason why, that it's not, you know, of course your land is better than my land. So at first he was dismissing the possibility that the work of the land manager could make a difference. But soon enough, within a year or two, he came to my colleague and said, "I want my land to look like your land." So that's one example of success breeding success. Also, I would say we can build on larger entities that are already happening. For example, we are in the UN decade on ecosystem restoration. And through that rubric, we can engage people in different regions and share successes and highlight them for the broader public.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much, Judith. We have about 2 minutes to invite any further remark or any follow-up thoughts or any anything you want to share.
If I can
Yes,
add
please.
something. So about this success breeds success, when I was in near Amboseli, and I was interviewing a couple of women from a grass seed bank initiative that a women's group had undertaken. So about expectation management, I was asking them of how do you see your land in, let's say, next couple of years? And they mentioned this concept of benchmarking actually to me, that they were taken to another area or another grass seed bank in a neighboring district called Kuku in Kenya. And they saw that the women there were benefiting extremely from the grass seed bank initiative. They were selling grass seeds. Of course, the initiative took 5 to 7 years to succeed, but they were very hopeful that if it could happen there, it can also happen in our plot. And they were also aware that, yes, the landscape is quite different here than how it was in Kuku. So they were also aware that it might not be similar to that, but they were quite hopeful because of this benchmarking that the success breeds success. So I think this looking at successful interventions can also be something that can be looked at.
Thank you very much for making it very complete with this line of thought. I would like to turn also the attention to our audience. If I may, I would like to invite us all to share your thoughts on this question: how to raise awareness and to initiate action on this topic. On this, how can we together manage better our microclimate and together make an impact? Again, we would go to Mentimeter. And we would see the code. You already see the code. You go to menti.com and you put in the code for the question. And I'm looking forward to hear from you, to see all your wisdom. The code is now on the screen. You can also see it in the chat box shortly. It's 82194266. Yeah, you can copy and paste it from the chat box also. How to raise awareness on this topic. Yeah, the insights and examples are coming. So I see field visits. Yeah, learning from each other, field visits. Seeing, feeling is believing. Demonstration sites can send a powerful message. Work through farmer cooperatives, yeah, and natural resource users groups. So we see here local organization. Bring local actors to negotiations such as the IPCC or the COP of the COP. Go ahead and try something. Invite others to join in. Yeah, take action. Use this book and its examples in the Utrecht University Master Program on Sustainable Development. You can reach out to Professor Hugo de Buur about that. Instruct people and show which benefits can bring these practices in economics and environmental way. Yeah, thank you. Inclusion of local people through their ownership and participatory approaches. Yeah. I see something also very interesting coming in through theater for development initiative. Yeah, I think it refers to telling stories, storytelling. National and regional knowledge sharing events with communities. Yeah, very, very well. Yeah. And communities practice. Yeah. Like Judith said, it is about agency. By changing land and water management on farms and also by choosing to eat regeneratively. Can't agree more. Exchange visits and study tour, that's coming quite strongly. Learning by doing. So starting your own microclimate management activity and learn from it and share it. We very much look forward to hear also from you other examples and to learn. Documentation videos, blogs, evidence-based knowledge sharing through experimental field well illustrate how the positive impact could be. That connects also to a very important chapter of the book on monitoring. How can we monitor and demonstrate the value and the benefits of microclimate management? So we again invite you to go to the book and see how can we together collect the evidence in a systematic way and to demonstrate the added values. Involve the local schools as well as farmers. Yeah, I think I would stop with demonstration sites. And I thank you all very much for providing, I think, a lot of very useful solutions or tips on how to raise awareness and initiate actions on microclimate management. For now, I think for the sake of time, let us move on to the final bits of our program. I thank you all for sharing your brilliant ideas and suggestions. To wrap up our sessions, I would like to have a few words of thanks and closing remark. May I invite Dr. Frank van Steenbergen, the director at Meta, and a book author, to give a few words. So please, over to you, Frank.
Thanks, Long, and thanks to everybody in this room. And I really think this has been a great discussion with a lot of important takeaway points on learning, applying knowledge, and the importance of success being shared with others, good practices, and probably also bad practice shared with others. And I think that's the second point, the importance of being networked, of being connected to each other. And this is also what we really hope, that this book is not just a sort of one product and that's it, but that we can sort of build on this and stay connected and share more examples. And we already learned that is one important way of creating this patchwork. So not only patchwork of local climate, but also a patchwork of people like us. And several examples were used also in the chat box of NICC, of IBRAT. There are good examples around, and if they're put in a network, then they become stronger. And then we get into this third way, which, for instance, Judith said, is more empowering because it's in the hands of ourselves. It's not the global picture that we need to deal with, but it's our own agency that we can use. So great. I want to thank and also give acknowledgements to many organizations that were part of preparing this book. It's based very much on work which was being facilitated by the IKEA Foundation in a program called Green Future Farming, and also now the Green Transformation Pathways in respectively East Africa and in the Agroecological Zone 7 in India. Several of us have worked together on this, Aid Environment, Just Dig It, RAIN. We really benefited also from the sort of rigor of Utrecht University and Erie Watch. We're developing also a method to measure this sort of local climate management, and I think that would be also helpful apart from all the local knowledge. Maybe to the next slide. So we're really grateful for you and for everybody who was part of this, and it's a journey, and I think this is just a small first milestone. The book can be ordered if there are libraries or people who cannot order, then please send a message to us as well. Femke's email address is there in the lower part. We have, apart from the book, and the website is mentioned, we have been working on more cases, more discoveries, and really would like to continue doing that, and the inputs in this meeting were really very, very important for this. And one of the persons that we benefited a lot and who contributed also was Justino. Justino is the president, the head of the indigenous nation in the Amazon in Ecuador. And yeah, we thought it's very appropriate that he has the last word, and show a small message of Justino from the Sicopai nation that he's leading on the border of Ecuador and Peru, and also trying to come to grips with climate change and improving the local climate. Thank you very much, and we stay connected.
Saludo cordial al mundo, a los pueblos indígenas, a los pueblos del mundo, a las naciones del mundo, desde la Amazonía ecuatoriana. Nosotros, los pueblos indígenas, en el caso particular de los Sicopai, estamos aquí en la Amazonía ecuatoriana. Somos un pueblo transfronterizo que vivimos por muchísimos años aquí en este territorio. Estamos preocupados en los últimos años, sobre todo, de cómo la biología, el microclima ha sido afectado en nuestros territorios. Por ejemplo, cuando se hable del río, hemos visto que hay intensas lluvias, pero también han habido intensas sequías. Hay en distintos tiempos lo que antes ocurría. Por ejemplo, en tiempos de sequía ya están las lluvias. En tiempos que deberían llover, más bien son tiempos de sequía. Ahí es cuando vemos con mucha preocupación cómo los peces no pueden, por ejemplo, procrear, reproducirse. Entonces ahí perdemos varias especies. Lo mismo ha ocurrido por ejemplo, en la selva, con los animales de la selva. Hoy nos hemos dado cuenta que hay 3 especies que se han perdido. La ardilla, el guatín que le llamamos, y la otra ardilla más pequeña. Hasta el mismo leoncillo que llaman, se han ido perdiendo por los cambios, no sabemos exactamente, pero por la distorsión, es decir, por la modificación, por estos cambios que han habido, se han ido perdiendo esta relación. También la sabiduría de los pueblos indígenas, cuando, por ejemplo, generalmente los Sicopai tomaban yagé en los meses de agosto, cuando el tiempo es más calmado, más tranquilo, pero eso no ocurre en la actualidad. Más bien son tiempos intensos de lluvia, y eso obviamente perjudica la conexión, la toma del yagé, la parte espiritual, en este caso de esta nación, y de otros pueblos emparentados como los sionas, así también como los cofanes. Entonces eso disminuye, eso impacta directamente a la sabiduría de los pueblos indígenas. Por eso exigimos al mundo, demandamos a las naciones que se llaman del primer mundo a preocuparse por esta casa grande que nosotros compartimos, la única casa. Y si no nos cuidamos, no protegemos, esto habría terminado, nosotros mismos habríamos terminado con nuestras propias vidas. Un saludo a todos, y exigimos que todos podamos seguir viviendo, pero seguir cuidando la naturaleza. Un abrazo a todos.